Greetings from LA, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today, if you don't mind, I would very much like to continue on with our journeys, our discussions, our discoveries, and our explorations with respect to the recent releases made by the Criterion Collection during this year of 2024. And earlier this year, they made a very fascinating release in the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray format, which is what I'm about to show, of a title that is, on the one hand, newly emerging in the Criterion Collection physical media catalog on the one hand, but it is also a title that has its own past history, physical media-wise anyway, with the Criterion Collection, which is what I hope to be able to talk about, and other points throughout the course of this video. And what work am I referring to? Now let me see if I can describe it in these terms. Choose life, choose a job, choose a career, choose a family, choose a big television, choose washing machines, cars, choose compact disc players and electrical tin openers. Choose 4K UHD plus Blu-ray release. Choose the Criterion Collection. Choose spy number 1204. Choose director Danny Boyle. Choose life. Choose TRAINSPOTTIng. This is the work, the electrifying work, which is described as being from the year 1996, and it is from the director Danny Boyle, producer Andrew MacDonald, screenplay by John Hodge, based upon the novel by Irving Welsh, and also among its classic cast, we have people like Ewan McGregor and Ewan Bremner and John E. Lee Miller and Robert Carlyle and Kelly MacDonald and others. Oh my goodness, what a film this is. This is the work which is I think a kind of landmark film. It's a film that has stood the test of time. It is very much, it can be said to be a type of emblematic film of the 1990s, the works of Danny Boyle, depictions of Scotland and Edinburgh in terms of its setting and location, and also very vividly drawn and rendered characters as part of its landscape, as portrayed by some of the cast members and actors that I've mentioned here. So their characters, Renton, Spud, Sick Boy, Diane, Begbie, and others. And their stories as intertwined and interlaced on the one hand, form a type of lattice work or patchwork, but with its focus perhaps primarily on the character, the Ewan McGregor character of Renton, and his story, both in terms of his friends and associates, and also his own personal one, that involves, among other things, among the various interpersonal relationships and his life, his daily life in Edinburgh and Scotland, and his viewpoints and the highs and lows and the ups and downs. Also his the way in which his life is being affected, perhaps in a topsy-turvy way, in a very maybe chaotic way, in a way that is meant to evoke a sense of the pull and drive and almost the addiction towards drug use, and specifically heroin on the one hand, but also showing many of the tragic points and the seriousness and the significant way and the adverse way in which this has the potential of affecting both his life and those around him. But it's doing it in terms that are very much in a cinematic sensibility of Danny Boyle and company, in a very direct, almost breaking down the grammar of cinema in a way, and using things that seem maybe over the top, virtuoso theatrical, and to mind-numbing effect that again brings the point home of a number of things that is on display in terms of the story arcs of all these characters, and primarily Renton, the Ewan McGregor character, but bringing home the points of a number of things, perhaps, namely that there is a type of adrenaline rush. There is a kind of self-described pull of the addiction, and this is also in the words of the characters as they are speaking this, and they are also enmeshing this within the day-to-day activities that we also see them partake. And this is also seeing how their interpersonal relationships might be affected, both in terms of drug use and oftentimes seen in a very negative light, perhaps even so negative that they might not realize it at the time. But in fact, the type of sway and pull of this can be quite frightening indeed. But also in terms of the way in which there's a type of youth culture presented here, and how it is affected by say nightclub life, sport life, football, and also the music overlaid as part of the brilliant soundtrack, or soundtracks, I should say, with TRAINSPOTTING, one of the famous soundtracks of recent memory, I should say. And it's shone through in the brilliance of the score. It has an electrifying, dazzling feel on the one hand that never lets go of the tragic and serious aspects that are also having a spotlight shone upon them, I think, in this remarkably sharp and vivid way. And so, not to mention, of course, the fact that we have, I think, a type of almost a sketch comedy aspect of this. I mean, it goes from beat to beat to beat in a way that feels like a very wonderful lattice work of feelings and fragments, and sometimes even jumping from moment to moment, from time period to time period, and also in a way that is winking at us. The filmmakers seem to be winking at us, maybe slyly nudging our elbows and saying, and we are allowed to be in the joke as well, in terms of how certain warped perspectives are shown on screen, in terms of how suddenly images and environments can swirl into a type of morass and a feeling of degradation on the one hand, or a feeling of total liberation on the other. Uh, there are some very iconic scenes that exemplify this. For example, the so-called or infamous toilet scene, or toilet bowl scene, which is one of the most shall I say, the most memorable, one of the most memorable scenes in this film, TRAINSPOTTING, and perhaps one of the most memorable scenes in all of Danny Boyle's filmography. And that's just one of many memorable scenes that occupy the cinematic palette and landscape that is TRAINSPOTTING. So there is so much here. There's so much here in terms of an inviting nature. There's so much here in terms of a fright or horror show. And I use that phrase in particular because there are a lot also of wonderfully laden applied references, such as A Clockwork Orange and others that really, I think, form the groundwork, or form a type of homage groundwork for a way into this film, TRAINSPOTTING, while at the same time, I think, very firmly and very confidently announcing to the world that this is a story, this is an Irvine Welsh story, and there's some really great points to be made about that we will talk about when we refer to some of the commentary track comments and also the supplements here, about how there's an interesting way about the novel and how the novel was adapted, and it was turned into this film, the Danny Boyle directed film TRAINSPOTTING, the John Hodge screenplay, Andrew McDonald producer. So there are aspects of it that are very similar and faithful to the novel TRAINSPOTTING, but there are also some liberties that are taken in terms of, in particular, about the structure and how certain characters are followed. In particular, how the character of Renton is given a type of prominent, at least in the cinematic voice here. Speaking of which, there is so much to be said, brilliant things to be said about the performances here. I mentioned the character Renton. Ewan McGregor. This is in many ways a type of this is one of the most famous roles, or one of the most famous characters of 90s cinema. And in the form of Ewan McGregor, his Renton, the way how it can dash from moments of panic and a frenzy to a type of delirium, and to maybe a sense of quietude and peace almost. I mean, it's really quite a remarkable rush of emotions and guiding points from point to point to point, and his character arc is really quite extraordinary. And in the form of the Ewan McGregor performance, it is absolutely dazzling. There's a way in which his smile and his his bewilderment is so affecting, and it affects us, the viewers, and it invites us in, and it makes us root for him or want to be with him or to hope for him to succeed, etc. And I mean, I mentioned certain homage points to other films of the past, like A Clockwork Orange, but I should also say that there are moments in this film, Trainspotting, and in particular how Renton, in the form of Ewan McGregor's performance, great performance, how it even evokes or is very evocative of the French New Wave and Francois Truffaut's The 400 Blows, and the idea of looks on faces and smiles, and but also how the looks might suggest something of the unknown of the future, and perhaps there is a type of cynical edge that is either nuanced and indirect, or perhaps becomes very, very prominent and very saturated as the film goes from beat to beat to beat. And again, in many ways, the sort of pulse of this film is measured by the swings of the character arc of a character like Renton. So it's one of the great performances, Ewan McGregor. But of course, it's among many characters that are also so memorable that have become a kind of part of the lexicon, if you will, of a discussion of 20th century, modern days, or 20th century or 90s cinema, and the cinema of Danny Boyle, and also the adaptation of Irving Welsh's novel. So Renton and Spud and Sick Boy and Begbie, and again, in the hands of these great performances of some of the actors that I've already mentioned, like Robert Carlyle, whose performance of Begbie is one of the volatile. It's over the top. It's a frightening. Operatic, and it can go from 0 to 100 in a heartbeat. It's one of those, another performance of the age, and it's ferocious, and it's one of those things that also lends itself to the extremities that are, I think, also a part of the inner workings of a film like Trainspotting, and it goes from extremity to extremity to extremity, while also, I think, never losing sight of kind of the tenderness that also is very possible, and that tenderness can become even more melancholic when we understand a lot of the terrible things that can happen, and perhaps do happen, to some of these characters as we come to know them and meet them and be with them as the film progresses. And so we see, again, in the form of these towering figures like Begbie and also Spud and Sick Boy. And I love I mean, I mentioned also homages to the past, right? And another thing, too, to keep in mind, the references to James Bond, Johnny Lee Miller's Sick Boy, and one of the famous scenes in a park, and references to Sean Connery and Dr. No and Diamonds Are Forever, and Sean Connery mannerisms, etc. And how this is also, in a way, keeping alive or alight this notion of a type of almost romanticism and Scotland, and also keeping in mind to how these characters view that through a lens of romanticism on the one hand, but also there's maybe a sly wink, maybe a sort of ironic edge, especially when we consider what their conditions are, and when we think of the environments that we see them in. And it's done in a very stylized way, but it also is hitting home the fact that there are a lot of there's a sense of economic downturn. There's also the sense of hopelessness. There's also the sense of maybe being misunderstood in terms of organizational structures, and maybe a lack of, or perhaps a perceived lack of, a type of effective sense of authority, a guiding authority or guiding sense of authority. So that can lead to, I think, many avenues of sort of chaos, and also maybe a sly sort of social commentary. Again, looking through the lens of this film, and the actors and performers and the dialogue, looking through those lenses and seeing Scotland, at least Trainspotting Scotland or Edinburgh Scotland, etc. And it's also done through these wonderful nods of the head, winks to the camera of James Bond references and such. So it's really quite remarkable and extraordinary, and as well as other performances too. Bremner has a kind of almost a a frailness in terms of physicality, but there's also this hyper realized sense of eagerness and wonderful energy that also might be suggestive of a type of tenderness and loyalty too, which is so wonderful. And then the performance by Kelly MacDonald, who we understand this was her debut performance and her debut as an actor. And it was an interesting set of circumstances that led her to being cast for the role of Diane, and it's an incredible, commanding performance, and it also leads us to furtherances and understandings of who these characters are, how she fits into the milieu of this life, how she is lending a type of maybe almost maybe casting or suspicious eye upon things, while also setting forth her own feelings and mannerisms as well, and how that is affecting certain other relationships. Again, going back to Renton and Begbie and Spud and Sick Boy, etc., and Tommy as well, and Swanee and others. So, my goodness, Train Spotting. This is an exciting one. It's an exhilarating thrill ride. It's also a horror show. It's a very frightening horror show at that. It can be equal parts comedy and horror. And I mean, when I say horror moments, I mean there are some moments that are absolutely horrifying and absolutely frightening. And I mentioned and disgusting and revolting even, and that's I think the point or part of the point. It's commented upon in the commentary track and some of the other supplements, again, which we'll talk about. But one of the things that Andrew MacDonald and John Hodge and Danny Boyle really wanted to emphasize was this is a film that is also directly speaking to or talking about or depicting aspects of heroin and drugs and drug use, as well as trying an addiction, but also trying to get over the addiction and trying to resolve certain emotional aspects, psychological aspects of this. The maybe the feeling of almost helplessness on one hand, and also the physical ordeals that are involved, as well as the mental and emotional ordeals that are involved with all aspects of this. And I think Danny Boyle and company were really trying to make a point about how this film, in some respects, might be showing to a certain degree a type of dazzling, exhilarating aspect of how drugs are affecting these people, such as Renton and others, on the one hand. But at the same time, they take great care to also show the real horrific consequences of this type of drug use. Really, really horrific. And so I think that they wanted to be sure, Danny Boyle and company wanted to be sure that this film would not be construed as being completely a film that is seen to be quote unquote promoting drug use, end quote. And so I think in that way, I mean, the moments of tragedy and horror, I think, are really exemplified and quite potent indeed, and that really drive home the fact of a need for a type of change or a type of breaking out of this evidently and self-described downward spiral and destructive lifestyle. And we see that in the form of Renton's own, or Ewan McGregor's character's own character arc and plot progression, right? Because we do see aspects of wanting to get out of this life, wanting to break free of this world where violence can erupt at any moment, or wanting to break free of the very dangerous pull of the drug addiction. And so when those opportunities might arise, and as the plot progresses to say various subplots that might lead to this potential and this possibility, then we as viewers will see, or will strive to see perhaps, just whether or not a character like Renton and others can take advantage of these opportunities to escape or not. Again, for those of you who have yet to see the film, you're going to have to watch to the end to find out whether or not those endeavors are successful or not. And that's part of the thrill. That's also part of the tragedy. That's also part of the, I think, overall effect and a supremely profound effect that this film Trainspotting has. And so this is in my own very, again, haphazard and quite scattered way, I apologize, to try to describe just how much I mean, it's for me as a viewer of this film. This film is in many ways it stands the test of time, and in many ways speaks to this cinema aesthetic of the '90s. I mean, this is a film that is so much a landmark film, just a landmark film from the '90s, and therefore, in that way, it remains supremely and wonderfully and brilliantly resonant even to this day. I mean, this is one of those. This is one of those films. I unfortunately was never able to watch this film in the theater when it was released around the late '90s, but I caught up with it very soon after because there's so much talk about this film when it emerged, and also from my viewpoint, again, growing up in the '80s and then in the '90s. There was this period of the '90s where you had a lot of what were marketed as being, independent films and the independent film circuit, and so this was becoming something, I don't want to say mainstream, but this was becoming a quite popular marketing way to showcase films that were quote unquote outside of a type of maybe a Hollywood movie making mechanism, and so in that way it allowed for maybe many different voices of cinema to reach wider audiences than they might otherwise have had opportunities prior to this. And so it was a very exciting time. Films like Pulp Fiction, etc., Reservoir Dogs come to mind as sort of pioneering this. Well, Trainspotting comes in this period, and I can remember from my own experiences and memories from the mid to late '90s, hearing about Trainspotting for the first time, seeing some of the commercials or adverts on TV, and feeling like it was also part of the sway and pull and the sort of exhilaration rush of kind of independent films that were being marketed very heavily during this time. But also, when I saw the film eventually, um, again, not so far after it had been initially released in the theaters. I caught up with it very soon after, but I remained so amazed by just how much it felt, again, on the one hand, part of that exhilaration rush of films of similar nature in the mid to late '90s on the one hand, but also it really hits home. I mean, when those heavy points hit, they really hit, and they are long lasting. They sting, and this in many ways it's very painful. It's a very painful film, and I think looking back on the '90s, at least my own experience with the '90s cinema, and Trainspotting is one of the great examples of this. I mean, the great films for me would always be those that have a way of drawing you in with this sort of exhilaration and cinematic style. And this film does so in wonderful doses and in wonderful heaps, right? But at the same time, it really grounds one, or really brings home those stinging points and those aspects of horror and those really significant moments that really drive home the various points of conflict and struggle that these characters are facing, and in a way that makes them and their portrait as characters on screen all the more three-dimensional and humanely drawn, I think, and thus long-lasting in terms of a type of longevity and of the cinematic spirit, which makes, therefore, again, I apologize for these sort of grandiose terms, but which makes, for me anyway, Trainspotting one of the most important films of the '90s, and therefore it makes me very excited every time I'm able to watch it. And so, on the occasion of this Criterion release, we have the ability to rewatch this film, and I'm still amazed by this film, even after what it was released in '96. And now I'm making this film in 2024, so that's almost 40 years. Right, or no, 30 years. Excuse me. That's nearly that's nearly 30 years. So that is a long time, and still, even nearly 30 years after it had been initially released, it still has its punch and power, and it feels like it's this invigorating rush, and all things concerned, and that is a signal to me anyway in terms of my own subjective cinema journey. It still signals to me the fact that this remains a kind of landmark film, and I'm so glad it's being made part of the Criterion Collection physical media release in terms of this new 4K UHD Blu-ray combo edition. It's by number 1204. I should point out that we will talk a little bit more about the contours of the packaging and the presentation and the great booklet, and which I've removed here prior to this, and also this really overall it's great stuff. But let me just end this part anyway with one other thing, which is we also are reminded too of how this film, Trainspotting, although it is being newly introduced in the current physical media catalog of Criterion, the 4K Blu-rays, and also the DVDs, spine number catalog. Although it's being newly introduced at spine number 1204, we are also reminded of the glory days of Criterion's Laserdiscs. And in fact, Trainspotting was one of the titles that Criterion had released in its Criterion Laserdisc spine number catalog. And so, in many ways, this is like a coming home moment of a film that had been released by Criterion in the Laserdisc era, and but now we are seeing the title reemerge in the Criterion fold. And so in that way, sometimes you might see this film being described as coming back to the Criterion Collection. Well, the reason for that is because it had been a Laserdisc way back in the day, but now it is coming back in the form of this new release. So Trainspotting is back in the Criterion Collection, and it is Criterion is doing so in a really glorious way, both in terms of the outer trimmings and the physical media components, but also a reminder to the chance and opportunity to visit or revisit, whatever the case may be, this truly exceptional work from Danny Boyle and company. And this is the film, which is Trainspotting. The Criterion Collection has released Trainspotting, courtesy of this newly minted release. And what I have here in front of me is the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray release. So it has two discs, one disc being the 4K UHD disc, and the other disc being the Blu-ray disc. And so I'll try to speak about both of those in the course of my following comments here. But if we were to speak a little bit about the master, the booklet, the great booklet, the staple booklet, has on page 29 thereof some notes about the master, and I quote, "Trainspotting is presented in its original aspect ratio of 1.85 to 1. This new digital master was created from the 35mm original camera negative, which was scanned in 4K resolution. The feature is presented in Dolby Vision HDR, high dynamic range on the 4K Ultra HD disc, and high definition SDR, standard dynamic range on the Blu-ray. The original 2.0 surround soundtrack was remastered from a Dolby Stereo print master. Please be sure to enable Dolby Pro Logic decoding on your receiver to properly play the Dolby 2.0 surround soundtrack. Dolby 5.1 surround soundtrack was remastered from the original 6-track Magnetic Masters by Ted Hall at Pacific Ocean Post in Santa Monica, California in 1997. And so we have, therefore, according to this, the alternate 5.1 soundtrack option. And also, please note, I have the 4K in the player right now, but it is a moving image type of 4K or Blu-ray menu, and so just in case I don't want to offend the YouTube copyright gods, and so in order to do that, just to not offend them, I've blocked out the moving images here. So I hope you can forgive me. I apologize again for my crude editing and video making skills, but I hope you can forgive me. But it is a very interesting assembly of montaged footage from the film, and also a reminder too of the great music, which we'll also touch upon a little bit more. By the way, I forgot to mention that the soundtracks, or maybe I did, but I'm just, again, delirium. It's just Trainspotting. What a film this is. But the soundtracks, the music, it's one of the most famous soundtracks. But and there's more than one, so it's really cool. But in any event, okay, the presentation. This is an interesting thing, because it's on the one hand, I've seen this film again. I've never had the good fortune, unfortunately, to have been able to see this film in the theater. I wish I had upon its initial release, but I wasn't able to, unfortunately. But I did catch up with it in terms of VHS rental release, and then also later with DVD. But I mean, they've always been very good and very startling in their impact. But I must say that on the one hand, this the way it looks and sounds now, courtesy of this Criterion, and also I mentioned too the Laserdisc as well. But now the way it looks and sounds with this new 4K is truly astounding. It is very astounding, and I admire its crispness. I admire the delineation. I also like the color usage, and there are some points when the color does stand out in a vibrant way, and there are other moments too, which I didn't quite realize until I saw it in this presentation here, which is there are moments when the color seems to be very drab and very almost drawn out or maybe worn out. And that worn out quality makes the vibrant moments when they do occur very vibrant. And there's almost this almost kind of uneasy or painful contrast that occurs between those two, sort of the washed out nature of it, and purposely done so on the one hand, but also the vibrance of it on the other. I never quite realized this, but it seems to me, to my eyes, that that contrast is made even more, I think, paramount and more pronounced. At least in my various viewings of this via the Criterion release here, and so I really admire that, and I think and I was never able to notice it as much with previous releases than I have been with this current Criterion release, and I think for me, on a kind of psychological level, from the perspective of someone who watches this film, that kind of sharpness of contrast of the very drab and the very vibrant, let's put it that way. And there are some scenes that really have this marked and pronounced way, quite remarkable. I never noticed that for this film before. So I think what that does for me on a type of subconscious level is it really also brings home the point even more that there is this really sharp divide between almost the stylistic, say, exhilaration of this type of, say, of this lifestyle on the one hand, but also the very almost the very drained out, almost a weary type of cloudy and grayish nature, which also is a reminder of a type of dour or maybe quite diluted or quite subdued aspect of the film. And it reminds me too of those various tones, and those tones too exist thematically in the film as well. So it's nice to have that visual reinforcement reminder in the form of, say, the presentation, or at least how I perceive the presentation. I really felt that way. I remain very excited by it, and I remain quite stunned by a lot of those choices when they do appear. And so, in many ways, I mean, I'm almost so startled that it's giving me some more food for thought on the one hand, but also quite startling because in some ways I'm not quite used to this yet. I'm going to have to watch this release a little bit more to get further acquainted with it. But so far, so good for me in terms of my limited watches of this film. I've seen the film with the Criterion release. I've seen it 3 times now. So it's there's a lot to process, and so I need to try to watch it a little bit more. But I'm getting used to it. I wasn't used to it when I first watched it. It was quite stunning. Almost really took me aback in some ways, but it really has a very overall quite a stunning effect on me, and I think it's very consistent with at least my reading, or one of my readings of this film. So I really love this. And then also the soundtrack, it rings gloriously to my ears, and there's even the little hisses or crackles or some moments when you hear that, and I think that's really great too, because there's a type of echo or hum that's so important in some of the scenes of the film, but also too that type of stylism, or not style, but style that comes about, sudden sharpness of silence, for instance, that occupies the soundtrack or the sound palette before all chaos roams, etc. As not to mention, of course, the wonderful way in which the music is laid in, and that is perceived and that is preserved so so brilliantly as well. So overall, I'm very much affected by this. I admit I'm going to have to watch it a few more times to get even more acquainted with some aspects of the presentation which feel new to me. But that's not a knock against this. I think it's a very exciting journey ahead with this. And so far, so good for me with regard to this. And so overall, I'm very excited about this. And so next, let's turn to one aspect of the supplements, or or one of the extras. It's the commentary track. So once again, the film Trainspotting can be seen on either the 4K disc, HDR, or the Blu-ray disc. And so we have the two discs, and so you can watch the film on either choice or disc option, and it's wonderful that way. And then also, together with the film, you can also watch the film while listening to the commentary track, again, either on the 4K disc or the Blu-ray disc. So, but when we come to the supplements themselves, you're going to have to use the Blu-ray disc because the 4K disc does not have the other supplements the Blu-ray does. So let's keep that in mind, which is, I think, very consistent with how Criterion and other labels for that matter, I think, have been doing the 4K plus Blu-ray combo release option. It's tended to be such that the wealth of supplements tend to be found in terms of the amount of data space that is needed on the disc itself. They tend to be found on the Blu-ray disc rather than the 4K disc. But the commentary track can be found on both as well as the film. So what is the commentary track here? It's one of the classics. It's one of the classic commentary tracks from 96, in fact. So it's a Criterion Collection commentary track. And so it's a reminder, too, of the early Criterion days, Laserdisc days, and the like. So it's great to have this. It's a timeless track, and it's wonderful to listen to this again in this way. So let me just quote here from the menu. So, and I quote, "This commentary track, recorded by the Criterion Collection in 1996, features director Danny Boyle, actor Ewan McGregor, producer Andrew MacDonald, and screenwriter John Hodge. To listen to the commentary while viewing the movie, press the audio key on your remote at any time." So, this is a great one. I mean, they speak immediately about, or almost immediately about, how they approached the Irvine Welsh novel, how they first came to know of the novel. I mean, at the time, before this film was made, it was considered as maybe relatively speaking, it was a kind of cult novel. It was a novel that hadn't gotten a lot of readership yet, but people who knew about it really were affected by the work. And so when Danny Boyle was introduced to the novel, he was drawn to it, as he says, immediately. And so, and then also seeing how Danny Boyle and Andrew MacDonald, the producer, and then John Hodge, the screenwriter, how they then had to come together and adapt this. And for those who know the novel, and I've read the novel a number of times as well. And one of the most remarkable things, I mean, it's a really incredible work of literature on the one hand, but it's also remarkable to consider how it was adapted in this way in the film Trainspotting, because there are some aspects that are very similar, but then there are other aspects that are very much, I think, taking an interesting adaptation spin on it. And I think that those points are spoken about to, I think, a very healthy degree here in this commentary track. For instance, they speak about how they try to maybe move certain portions of the dialogue and maybe think about the ordering of things, and that leads to the reason why the film opens in its, I think, very iconic way with the so-called "choose life" speech. On the one hand, also the decision to focus on one of the characters, that being the Ewan McGregor character Renton. So Renton in many ways becomes a kind of main character of the film, but we are reminded of how the Welsh novel has a kind of community of characters that we tend to follow or progress, etc. And those characters are part of the palette of the film, but we also understand too that the film can also be described as as Renton's story, in a manner of speaking. So that's an interesting aspect there. Also, they speak of it too. They speak about other cast members, again, Ewan McGregor, Robert Carlyle, whose performance is very towering, and it's very interesting. They speak about the character of Begbie, and how Begbie maybe could be seen as this towering, almost larger than life figure. I mean, physically speaking as well. But Robert Carlyle, in terms of his own physicality, is relatively speaking, not the say the he doesn't have an overbearing physical frame. Let me put it that way. But I think in many ways that is a wonderful choice, and I think the filmmakers here acknowledge that because it makes his own ferocity even more ferocious in this great way. So, and that's also due to the driving force of Robert Carlyle's performance. That's really, really wonderful. Also, other cast members, Johnny Lee Miller, and he plays the character of Sick Boy, one of the other key characters here, and it's so great. I didn't know until I heard this commentary track. I mean, I've heard this commentary track before, so but I'm reminded when I first heard the commentary track and learned more about Trainspotting, I didn't realize the connections that Johnny Lee Miller had with the world of James Bond, and the world of the cinematic world of James Bond, and Sean Connery and Bernard Lee and James Bond and M, etc. So it makes those connections it makes those connections, and the fact that Sick Boy in particular has this way about speaking about James Bond and Sean Connery. It's so cool. So those are some other interesting aspects that come through, shining through in this great commentary track. And there's also this idea about how to capture the various tenors of the film. There's a humor there that's a type of there's a humor that is kind of over the top and very flashy and stylized. There's also a lot of dark, sinister humor, and there's also there's a lot of subject matter, in fact, that can be considered quite sensitive in tone and very horrific in tone, and maybe almost even to the point of being ghastly and maybe very offensive in terms of subject matter. I mean, there are some moments that are really quite stirring and visually arresting and very disturbing indeed. So it sort of, I think, rides that balance very well. And I think the filmmakers, too, are very sensitive and cognizant of trying to achieve various tones in this film. Not just show the quote-unquote glorified exhilaration aspect of this life that is very much affected by drug use, but also show the very stunning and very hard-hitting lows, and there are so many, and that leads to some kind of iconic scenes in the film. I mentioned the toilet scene. That scene is mentioned so much throughout the commentary track and also in the supplements. I mean, that is one of the most over-the-top scenes that one will see, and I remember seeing that scene for the first time. It was, my gosh, I mean, it was so many feelings at the same time were swirling, yes, swirling in that toilet scene that I was watching. So in any event, too, and also just other things too, like how this film came up in the various careers of Ewan McGregor and Danny Boyle and company, John Hodge and company, and how a lot of the ability to get this film made rested on the great success of an earlier film called Shallow Grave. And so and there's some interesting connections too that are also marked upon in this commentary track between Shallow Grave and this film Trainspotting. So for those of you who know the films, see if you can catch spot the connection, or maybe there's more than one, and I think it's alluded to in the commentary track. So this is again one of the great commentary tracks, and I'm glad it was included here. It feels so fresh and vibrant and alive. It feels like it was made yesterday. I mean, it still is sparkling and spot on. So, bravo for being able to do this. And it's packed with so much information that I think the great commentary tracks always do. So, it's great that it's being included here again for purposes of this Criterion release. So that's some my 2 cents when it comes to the commentary track. And now let us turn our attention, if I may, to the supplements. And so once again, this means that the supplements will be found on the Blu-ray disc. not on the 4K disc, but the Blu-ray disc. So now I have in the player the Blu-ray disc, and once again I apologize for blocking out part of the video screen, but again, for purposes of not offending the YouTube copyright gods, I have blocked it out because the Blu-ray menu is also showcasing a bunch of moving images, montage edited together for purposes of this Blu-ray menu. It's a great menu, by the way, so please check it out. But again, with the Blu-ray, we have the movie being made available to watch, plus the option for the commentary track. And then we have the supplements. So the supplements will be found here on the Blu-ray. So it's divided up into a number of interesting subdivisions. So designing, listening, archiving, remembering, deleting, advertising, and reading. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 subdivisions. So that's really interesting. And when you press 1, it goes into a further sub menu. So let's go to the first one, designing. When you press designing, it goes to this. In this interview conducted by the Criterion Collection in 2023, costume designer Rachel Fleming and production designer Cave Quinn discussed the look of Trainspotting. So this is approximately 19 minutes, and it's called The Looks of Trainspotting. And this is great. These are from two of the key collaborators and artists working on this film. So Rachel Fleming in terms of costume design, and Cave Quinn in terms of the production design and the look of the look of the film in terms of the costumes and then the environments. So this is fantastic. I mean, they're being interviewed, and we hear their audio comments. And we see examples of what they're speaking about. It's almost like a video or visual essay in a manner of speaking, with the two of them speaking. And they talk about, for instance, some of the key maybe reference points that Danny Boyle was sharing, and how they were aligning in terms of maybe Hopper and Bacon on the one hand, and also football and also aspects of certain parts of Edinburgh and the city and the look and aesthetics. So, and how that was transferred over into things like wallpaper and wallpaper choices, and also again, it comes up here as well, the infamous toilet scene, and the study into how to get the grime just right for the toilet bowl and all this stuff. So these and other points make for really compelling aspects, because one of the key success points of Trainspotting is the environment, the look, the production design. I mean, it looks fabulous. Absolutely, undeniably, it's just across the board, it's fabulous, and the look is just, the rooms are, again, I was mentioning it before in terms of how I was impacted by the 4K presentation of this, which is when it has that drab look, it feels so obviously and so on purpose and on point, that down in the dumps look, which is so apropos. And then when it explodes in a type of vibrancy and flashing light and openness of, say, parks and the environment of Scotland in certain key sequences, as well as how light shines through certain windows, and exterior scenes. Those contrasts are so vividly drawn. It's brilliant, and even the details as to wallpaper, carpet choices, etc. This is great stuff. So, and then that's one part of this too, because the other part is the discussion of the costumes and the fashion choices. And again, we have so many key details that emerge, and I learned so much about this, and it reminds me too about how Trainspotting is a film that has so many details and so many references, and I will never be able to catch them all. I visited Edinburgh once, but I've never lived there, and there are many aspects of mannerisms and sort of, cultural touch points, and maybe dialect and word choice, etc., that I will never be able to catch. I will do my best, but it's with great supplements like this that really enable me and help me to do so. And so it's part of the details, and so other aspects of costume choices, like the shirt and the size of the shirt that Renton wears sometimes, and also the ties and the jacket choices, and the else. Oh, it's so great, and how they each have their own look and style, and how it really can change, really change, or give multi dimensions to their character. I mean, one, I think, very clear example of this is the character of Diane. Really, very different aspects to her character that are shown through with respect to this. So this is, and also a character like Sick Boy, or something, or and then also the look of Begbie, and the like, and how this almost is suggestive of uh, of a type of, maybe, there's almost a school uniform type of look that is maybe referenced when in the discussion of Begbie, etc. So these details are incredible, absolutely incredible, so intricate and so minute. So it makes for even further potentially rewarding rewatch of this film when you try to catch all these and other details. It's remarkable, absolutely remarkable. So. Yeah, so and also too just points to about how they're trying to really go with the flow, or try to show a sense of the time, so the mid to late 90s, maybe, music scene, and they maybe mention things about things like baggy jeans, etc., being part of maybe the cultural milieu of the moment. But maybe the characters like Renton and Spud and Sick Boy, etc., maybe they were not going with that, but they were essentially going in a different direction, but also going in the same direction as well. So these points about how it's also kind of cultural touchstones, aspects of the 90s, and Scotland and Edinburgh, and those things too, again, are wonderful learning points, and which makes this a great supplement. So this is wonderful. Approximately 19 minutes. So this is Designing, so Looks of Trainspotting, with Rachel Fleming and Cave Quinn. So that's the first supplement. And that was also from 2023. So it's a new supplement. So that's really great. And then next is Listening. This is great because it's the following program presents recollections from musicians featured on the Trainspotting soundtrack: Iggy Pop, Bobby Gillespie from Primal Scream, Damon Albarn from Blur, Jarvis Cocker, Pulp, Neil Barnes, Left Field, and Rick Smith and Carl Hyde, Underworld. Yes, as well as Noel Gallagher, Oasis. So the soundtrack is in many ways it's the beating heart of the film. And in elsewhere in one of the supplements, Danny Boyle goes so far as to say that particular soundtrack or particular album, and he refers to Underworld, but it's I think also can be made in reference to all the songs that are used in the film Trainspotting. But it's the beating heart of the film, and in many ways that is so right. In not many ways, that is so right, and the music is so important, and the musical choices are so important. And again, I remember when I first heard the music from Trainspotting, and again, this was in mid to late 90s, or just the late 90s, and so a lot of these, for me, and still growing up, right, a lot of this music was very fresh and new for me, so it's just an explosion of this awesome stuff for me. And I've never looked back. It's been a wonderful experience in terms of musical journey, and I think Trainspotting has been such an important musical education for me. And so it's great, therefore, to see and hear some of the comments from these musicians and artists and songwriters, etc. Sometimes we'll see text of their quotes on screen, like Iggy Pop, for instance, or Noel Gallagher. You'll see their text of what they refer to, and oftentimes what's interesting is that some of their comments will be talking about not necessarily the songs that were used for the film, but rather how they feel about um, Trainspotting, or how they feel about the Danny Boyle work. And so that, I think, is really quite fascinating. And so it shows this almost symbiotic relationship between the music that's chosen on the one hand, also the musicians and songwriters and artists who are responsible for the creation of those songs, how it's sort of a mutually respectful relationship from the filmmakers to the artists on the one hand, and the artists to the filmmakers on the other. So it's really, really great. So sometimes you'll see the text, but other times you'll hear the audio comments and reactions from them. For instance, Bobby Gillespie mentions how he really wanted to be part of the soundtrack and just would do anything to be part of the soundtrack. And just he was very fortunate to be able to get that in terms of a Primal Scream. And then Jarvis Cocker talks about moving to London. And moving to London is really, really small, flat, he mentioned. Just how that also is very reflective, too, of a similar type of scene that happens in Trainspotting, etc. So, left field, too, Neil Barnes talking about how this is, came about in sort of the context of the growth of right, and just of their music as well. So, and then Noel Gallagher, too. Noel Gallagher's comments are really interesting. You'll see Noel Gallagher's text comments. So, and he talks about the long-lasting impact of Trainspotting. And reading those comments now in 2024, it's just the very prescient indeed. So and then of course others, and then there's also a great interesting comment from Danny Boyle as well about closet romantics. And so please check out the very end of that and take a look at that. That's really cool indeed. Oh, so great, so many great anecdotes and so many reminders too of the importance of the music. So this is the listening part. This is the soundtrack, and it's approximately 12 minutes. Also, there's an interesting comment that Iggy Pop makes about Miami, so I just checked that out as well. So I got a kick out of that. But anyway, that's the second one, so that's really great. Next one is archiving. Okay, archiving. So this is Off the Rails, the making of Trainspotting. So Off the Rails, the making of Trainspotting is compiled from on-set footage and interviews conducted during and in the years following the film's production. So this is approximately 45 minutes. So you get so many people being interviewed here, like Danny Boyle, Andrew McDonald, John Hodge, speaking about the performances, Ewan McGregor's performance, Robert Carlyle's performance, Kelly MacDonald as well, and the impact of Irving Welsh's novel. The toilet scene comes up again. There's an interesting anecdote with respect to that, and Stephen Fry that comes up. And also, too, I love this homage. This is one thing that when I first saw it, just mind explosion occurred for me, which is, that scene has a lot of connections with an earlier scene. I'm sorry, with an earlier film from the 1980s called A Nightmare on Elm Street. And there's a scene in that horror film involving a bathtub, which is very much similar to the toilet scene in Trainspotting. And so there's also how the film's shallow grave impacted the ability to be able to make Trainspotting. Ewan Bremner's Spud, the character is also spoken about, Johnny Lee Miller's Sick Boy, etc. So, and then also too, this the kind of dilemma that is, I think, ever present with this film Trainspotting in terms of making it, and also post-production and its impact on the public. Namely, is it a film that glamorizes drug use and romanticizes drug use, or is it a film that really shows the horror of drug use? And perhaps, and I think to the credit of the filmmakers here, Andrew McDonald and Danny Boyle and company, perhaps it might do both at the same time. But it never flinches. I mean, it always shows very unflinching and very, very direct the pain that is also involved. And there are some, as I mentioned before, there are some really horrific moments that occur that are just incredibly painful. So I think that is a way to address that, I think, ongoing comment or maybe even debate in terms of how to read this film, Trainspotting. And then, too, speaking about the musical choices, how they're very important in terms of Underworld, and then also the look and feel and aesthetic of the film. Kate Quinn and others. How silhouettes are important as well, and Iggy Pop, and how the way in which they were able to assemble this incredible gathering of artists for the soundtrack, etc. So yes, this and other reasons, I think. Oh, and also there's a great comment about how this, among other things, it's a coming of age film. This film is a coming of age film. It's a story about youth and coming of age. So I thought that was also another great way of reading this. I mean, this is a film, Trainspotting, that can be read in many ways, and so that's one of them. So well done for being able to remind us of this. Overall, another great one. It is approximately, gosh, what is it? What did I say? Approximately 45 minutes. So please check this one out if you can. This is archiving. Yeah, and that's not all, because then we have remembering. So this 2008 documentary, Memories of Trainspotting, features interviews with director Danny Boyle, producer Andrew McDonald, screenwriter John Hodge, and actors Ewan McGregor, Ewan Bremner, Kelly MacDonald, and Robert Carlyle. Okay, so this is another documentary, also approximately 45 minutes. So here we get a lot of the comments that we might have heard so far in the commentary track and in the earlier Off the Rails, but it's great to hear them again. And also we are getting perspectives from people that we haven't been, we're seeing their interviews here, like Kelly MacDonald and Ewan Bremner. So it's nice to have those interviews here as well as the interviews with others here. Really great. Robert Carlyle's and Ewan McGregor's, for example, and it's here to hear, for instance, Kelly MacDonald, how she how she came about being cast, and what were the circumstances involving the audition process, which is a very interesting process that she mentions. There's also talk here a little bit about the stage version, the stage play version of Trainspotting versus the eventual film version of Trainspotting, and how there are a number of differences there as well as Ewan Bremner's connection with both. Ewan Bremner brings, I think, a lot of really great type of humanity and a type of earnestness in terms of the character Spud. So it's really great to hear that. There's a kind of playful banter in terms of there's a moment where Danny Boyle was interviewed and saying, "Oh, Ewan Bremner is a great performer, great actor, etc." And then it cuts to Ewan Bremner saying, "Oh, Danny Boyle never hired me again," or something. So there's kind of this wry sort of I don't know. Affectionate, passive aggressive nature, I think, but it's I think it's all for fun, or perhaps I'm not sure, but in any event, that's an interesting detail that emerges as well. But it's part of, I think, the real appeal of a documentary like this. And there's an interesting there's some anecdotes that also close out the documentary. I really enjoy, in particular, Kelly MacDonald's anecdote that's at the very end here. It's very very amusing. There's also, among other things, among other topics, there's some interesting talk about what were the plans at the time of the making of this documentary, again, circa 2008. What were the plans about any possible future sequels based, for instance, on other works by Irving Welsh? And so the written work Porno is referenced here, and so the idea of that could be the basis of maybe a return to the world and these characters, Begbie and Renton, etc. So whether that was possible then, and so it's interesting to hear the filmmakers and the actors here, Danny Boyle and Robert Carlyle and others, speak about the possibility of maybe going back into this world with another film, perhaps, maybe, who knows, with a sequel, given the recent work of Irving Welsh, etc. So it's interesting to hear that now, because, of course, now in 2024, we do know that, yes, indeed, there was another film in terms of this. So, but at the time, 2008, that hadn't happened yet. So it's interesting to hear those comments. But in any event, that's another thing too. It would have been interesting if Criterion had been able to get the rights to release the sequel as well. So that would have been an interesting one too. Trainspotting and then the sequel to Trainspotting. But in any event, we have Trainspotting. We have those interesting comments of what if a sequel could have been made. Again, those comments being made in 2008. So that's very interesting as well. I should mention too that there's also great praise given in terms of the great work, cinematography. Brian Tufano The great the director of photography, Brian Tufano. I mean, it's superb, and that acknowledgement is being made in a lot of places here. For instance, in this documentary, also the editor. Masahiro Hirakubo, and also the editing is so important. Also because Hirakubo, the editor, is acknowledged as having such a great keen ear for music, and so the editor was able to really align the sequences with the music so perfectly, and so I really appreciate that acknowledgement by Danny Boyle and others in this documentary. So really great stuff. So please check it out if you can. It's definitely worth it. Well, there's also an interesting reference to Barry Norman as well, so please check it out if you can. So this is Remembering, the 2008 documentary, Memories of Trainspotting. Okay, we're almost through. There's a lot of stuff here, right? So next up is deleting. And this is, the following scenes were deleted from the final cut of Trainspotting. To listen to the commentary by the filmmakers, press the audio key on your remote at any time. So it's really interesting to see these scenes, and it's also interesting to hear the commentary from a number of the performers and also the filmmakers. So you can play them all in one go or one sitting. It's approximately 10 minutes overall, so you can play them all in one sitting, or you can select the specific scenes. They're numbered, except for the last one, which is referred to as deleted Australia scene. And it's a reference to certain characters and a discussion that they're having. They do make some interesting points too about how the deletion or the choice to delete these scenes may have been due to the fact of how they chose to adapt the Welsh novel. Because again, for those who know the Irving Welsh novel Trainspotting, you'll understand, or you'll appreciate the fact that the novel really is a showcase of many characters. It's multi-character, and so it's not just a main through line and a main character per se, but it's many different stories. It is a type of patchwork. Whereas the film Trainspotting could be said to be, it does have this kind of frenetic energy about it, which is very similar to the novel, of course, but also it is establishing a kind of through line that is focused on the Ewan McGregor character Renton. And as a result of that cinematic choice, what it meant is a number of scenes had to be removed due to the fact that they were removed in order to make the Renton storyline more prominent. And so a number of these scenes you'll find tend to be, or might be, scenes that are involving other characters or focusing on other characters. Like there's a scene involving Renton and a sick boy that's focusing in more on sick boy's own story arc that was then deleted perhaps in favor of maintaining a Renton through line. There's another character too, a deleted scene here. There's another very important character, the Swanee character, who has a lot happening that is not necessarily shown in the final cut of the film, but you'll see in some of the edited scenes what happens to the Swanee character. You see a little bit of Swanee in the final film, of course, but there's a lot that happens. And so you see that part of the story. So that had to be excised in favor of maintaining the Renton through line in terms of its prominence. So, but it's great to have, therefore, the opportunity to be able to see a number of these scenes in this fashion, again with the commentary track to add further guidance as to the decision for the deletions, etc. So this is the deleted scene section with the option of the commentary. This is totaling approximately 10 minutes. Then we have advertising, which is the teaser trailer, which is an interesting trailer involving train tracks and Ewan McGregor speaking to the camera. It's also reminiscent of early pioneer cinema, silent cinema too, which is an interesting little detail. And then also the theatrical trailer, which it's quite revealing in terms of a number of the shots that are shown there. So that's the theatrical trailer as well. And then there's reading, which is a final little, it could be described as an Easter egg. And this reading part is approximately 2 minutes. This is the audio of the recording of Ewan McGregor takes reading off for purposes of the Criterion Collection commentary track. And so it's an interesting little glimpse into the recording sessions and Ewan McGregor. So it's a lovely Easter egg. So please check that out if you can. Oh, wow. I'm breathless. It's like it's like how I feel at the end of viewing of Trainspotting. I feel just as breathless. It's that packed of a supplement section. So, I mean, there's a lot here. I mean, some of it, of course, is carried over from other sources. So maybe these might be things that you might have seen or heard before. Perhaps in the case of the commentary track, you might have heard it before. There are some new things as well here, which is really nice. I draw your attention, for instance, to the designing supplement, the first one here as well. But overall, you're getting so much, and it's two 45-minute or so documentaries as well that have a lot of overlapping information, but also they go off in their own directions as well. So it further adds to the overall wealth of information that's available here. So this is really, really tops, and I'm very impressed with this. It's great to have this feeling of stacked supplements and with this whole wealth of information about this. So bravo for being able to do this. I'm very, very impressed indeed. And so now let us focus our attention on some of the contours of the physical media packaging contours of this. And this is an interesting choice that we have here. Okay, so the 4K UHD plus Blu-ray release is what I have here, and it's this type of, how should I put it? It's a cardboard flap type of casing, and it's a flap which has this flap closing contraption. There's a slit with a little part where this fold-out portion can both fit in and lock in place like that to close it in the back, and then also you lift it from this to unfold and unveil what is inside. So and what we have inside are the sleeves. These are cardboard sleeves that house the here we go. There's the cardboard sleeves that house the discs themselves, and so you can see actually this is a sleeve for the 4K disc, and this is a sleeve for the Blu-ray disc. So, and then there's a little sleeve in here for the booklet, and I've just removed the booklet for purposes of today's discussion, but the booklet would go in here like so. So it goes something like this. So the booklet goes in here, but it's a very interesting choice and design for packaging. You know, it might not be to the liking of everyone concerned, because it does involve certain size dimension, which is somewhat bigger in size than, say, the plastic casing that's often used for Criterion and indeed other labels. For instance, here, let me take. There we go. So this is the for instance, another disc that I have here with me. So you can see here this plastic case, when compared to the size dimensions of the Trainspotting case, you can see that already the height of the Trainspotting case is a little bit higher than the standard size plastic casing, and also there's a little bit of a thinness there, but I think it's really cool. I think it really is cool for a number of reasons. I like the plastic casing, don't get me wrong, but I think sometimes when Criterion does little quirky things like this, I get a kick out of it so much. Now, I like the way that it has this oversized dimension to it. It reminds me a little bit to it maybe in a subtle way, it's a reminder to of the Criterion Laserdisc, and had that oversized dimension, that being a Laserdisc. It's like a vinyl record size. So I like how it's maybe a subtle callback to that. I'm not sure. I also like this. I don't know if it's on purpose, but there's these things maybe from the 1980s called Trapper Keepers. Does anyone remember those binders that you'd had for school? It has that kind of Trapper Keeper look to it, which I really think is awesome. But and not to mention too the fact that it's this great kind of off-white with the orange look, and then the pictures that are here, which is very similar to the photos that were used for a lot of the marketing and publicity for the film Trainspotting on the one hand, but they're slightly different as well than what I'm used to in terms of a lot of the main poster and poster art for Trainspotting that was part of the release back in the day. So I like these little details. They really, I think, stand out and shine forth quite marvelously, as well as giving us further looks to the there's this lovely type of irreverence, which I love, and oh, this is great. I think I go back and forth when it comes to the discs and using these cardboard sleeves, because I'm always a little bit worried about, oh, the disc is actually touching, the back of the disc is touching the surface of the cardboard. And so on the one hand, I get worried because would that expose the underside of the disc to possibly more scratches or maybe dust particles, etc. But I'm also reminded of the fact that the discs, the Blu-ray discs and the 4K discs tend to be very resilient. And so and the cardboard itself has a kind of smooth texture to it. So I tend to go back and forth in terms of the cardboard sleeves, but I'm okay for now. So for the time being, I do have the discs and the cardboard sleeves. I might choose to remove the discs and put them back into maybe separate cases. Who knows? But it's okay for now. As I say, I go back and forth on my feelings on that, but it's I understand the point about how the discs tend to be more resilient, and so having sleeve compartment holding for discs like this can tend to be okay and not necessarily expose the discs to immediate scratches or damage. So I understand that component, but anyway, to each their own, of course. So if you feel more comfortable with having the discs in separate, say, storage cases, I think I respect that very much. But if you're okay with using the sleeves, that's fine. Whatever works for you, my dear friends. Whatever works for you. So, but that's not all in terms of the goodies, because we have a booklet, and it's a huge, robust, stable booklet. It's very, very cool. And we've got so many pictures as well. Again, so many different takes of these photos and the like, which is really awesome. Really, really awesome. Oh, this is so great. And what's so great too is we have there's so much writing here, which is wonderful, and it's using the side columns as well. I mean, here's an example. The main text of some of the essay pages is found here in the main part of the central part of the page, but also in the columns in the side here, there's some additional text as well. So this is a really packed, interactive kind of booklet. And so this is the stuff that I think makes booklets, staple booklets, so grand and so eloquent and so excellent. This is one of the best booklets that I've encountered. This is why booklets. This is why I love booklets. So this is really cool. And so another thing too to keep in mind is there is the essay Beyond the Tracks, the Graham Fuller essay Beyond the Tracks. And there's also the writing No Victims from Irving Welsh himself. And the Irving Welsh essay, or the Irving Welsh write-up, or the writing I should say, No Victims, is actually taken too from the Criterion Laserdisc from 96-97. So, and I just want to quote one of the passages from the Irving Welsh essay here, which I think is really apropos. On page 28, it's found. It says, and I quote, "The real resonance of Trainspotting and the reason it has so far stood the test of time is not that it's a story about drugs or even youth. It's a tale about a society in transition to a technology-driven world without paid work for human beings. This phenomenon is no longer limited to the old, traditional working class that Renton, Begbie, Sick Boy, and Spud came from. It now encompasses everyone. What do we do when there is no work?" Wow. So, wow. Really, wow. So those are the writings that will greet you when you check out this great booklet. My strong suggestion, as always, is to watch the film first, and then you can read these great essays. I mean, they're really fantastic. But that's not all in terms of the writings, because starting on page 10, you can actually find in the side here, you can find a glossary. So there's a glossary of terms that are used in Trainspotting. And it says, "This guide to the Scottish slang used by the characters in the 1993 novel Trainspotting and its later film adaptation was assembled by author Irving Welsh and originally published as part of the book." So you've got the glossary, which was also a really interesting feature of the Laserdisc, by the way. So that's really cool that it's kind of great carryover of this. And it's using the pages in a very creative way. So I love this. So you can get it here in this separate text, while also enjoying the body of the essay itself as you're reading. So there's multi stuff that's happening on a single page, which I really appreciate. And then there is also, in addition to those writings in the glossary, there are some dialogue quotes that are mentioned in some of the pages by some of the characters. And then also some pictures about this series. There's an ad, a picture of one of the ads from the marketing campaign, etc. Oh my goodness, this is really quite. And there's some quotes here from the character Sick Boy. There's the Choose Life speech, which is very famous, and others. Oh my goodness, this is really awesome. I just want to say to Spud's glasses. I love Spud's glasses, but in any event, and I'm glad that they are memorialized. They're memorialized in the film, and they're also memorialized here in this photo. So, and not just one, two, but many as well. So that's great. But in any event, my goodness, this is really really cool. And the I like too. There's this great detail on page 34 about the type styles, the fonts that are used, the ink that's used, and also the materials that it's printed on. So that's very, very cool indeed. Just the details that go into this. Not to mention, of course, the cover that's on the booklet here, TRAINSPOTTIng brand guidelines and the arrows, etc. And oh my goodness, this is great. Incidentally, the fonts that are used, that's an interesting choice. Helvetica 75 bold and Transport D medium. Bravo. I mean, could this go down in history as being one of the best Criterion booklets ever? I'm not sure. I mean, I've never thought about that question before, but it might. It just well might. This is one of the best. This is really one of the best. I am very, very impressed with this. Everywhere you turn, there's a little goodie. Even in the back, the more you look, you realize the back cover here. There's this text here that's called About the Master. So there's information anywhere you go. Type style B. It's oh my goodness. So and I'm sure there are many other things that I haven't caught yet that I'm going to have to try to catch. So there is so much packed in here, which makes it kind of interactive and fun, which is what I love about this. I love it when a physical media release allows for this type of fun and this type of playfulness. And I think that's very apropos of the film itself, because it does have that type of playful winking of the eye, winking to the audience about its subject matter, while also being, I think, many things at once. And that's exemplified in so many aspects of. Oh, I forgot to mention too. Please forgive me. Please forgive me. I'm overwhelmed with excitement that I forget so many things. But I should make a note of the artists that are acknowledged here. So art directors Mark Blemire and Sarah Habibi and Eric Skillman. Designer Mark Blemire Blam at Grow Up Art, based upon the original poster designed by Mark Blemire and Rob O'Connor. Photography Lorenzo Agis, and art production coordinator William Breeze, art assistant Julie Sussman, and menu animation Jonathan Kilk. So this is really wonderful. So I'm very, very impressed with this indeed. I'm not a designer, I'm not an artist, I'm not a photographer. I'm not an artist in any capacity whatsoever, so maybe my ability to appreciate these details is quite limited, and I acknowledge that. But even in my own limited capacity, I'm getting a huge kick out of this stuff. I think this is one of the greats, and I think across the board, it's great, absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful indeed. And even where there might be certain maybe points of criticism that I could make, in particular maybe the use of the sleeves for the discs themselves, but it's still, I mentioned that I go back and forth in that as well, so I can find that acceptable, at least for my own subjective consumption experience at the end of the day. But overall, I think this is tops. Absolutely tops. So consider me impressed when it comes to this. So that is in a nutshell. That is in a nutshell the my take on Criterion's release of TRAINSPOTTIng. So I'm a fan. I'm a fan of this, and so my dear friends, please, have you watched this film? Have you experienced the Criterion release of this? If so, please feel free to let me know your thoughts and comments. in the comment section below. I'm always happy to hear what it is you have to say. If you have any positive feedback, negative feedback, points of criticism, anything you want, my dear friends. However you feel, your feelings are very important. So please feel free to let me know. I may agree, I may disagree, but at the end of the day, I always hold what it is you say very, very highly. They deserve. Your feelings are ones that I want to respect. So please feel free to let me know your thoughts at any time. But my dear friends, let me end it here. And so let me now go to the kitchen and grab a glass of water and sit down and take a breath and just recompose myself and my thoughts, because this has taken a lot out of me. But I mean that wholeheartedly and positively. This has been a fun and invigorating revisit of this film. That is, it is so powerful and impactful and so exhilarating all at once, and it remains so even many years after its initial release. I mean, this is still a powerhouse of a film. And thanks to a release like Criterion, this is even made even more recognizable. And perhaps this will be made recognizable to hopefully as many people as possible who get a chance to watch this film on this release. And the film is TRAINSPOTTIng. So with that, my dear friends, thank you very much. And so until the next video, I very, very much hope, I really, really hope that everything with you is happy and healthy and well. And I hope that you are happy and healthy and well, and the same holds true for your family and friends and loved ones. I really, really hope so. A lot is happening, maybe a lot of things, good things and not so good things. Maybe things that are very difficult and things that are very unexpected and trying and challenging, etc. So whatever the situation is for you, my dear friends, I hope all is well, or as well as can be expected, or well as can be given the circumstances. And at the end of the day, once you have taken care of all the things that you need to take care of, once you have given due consideration to all that you need to handle in your situation, whatever the case may be, as long as you've done all those things, I hope you still have the opportunity to watch a lot of great movies, because my dear friends, you deserve it. So my dear friends, I always hope that you continue to be able to watch a lot of great movies like TRAINSPOTTIng, like other films by Danny Boyle, like other films in the Criterion Collection, and beyond. So until the next video, my dear friends, stay strong, stay safe, and cheers.